We actually said the primary goal of why we started Brave Cities was to try to save the lives of apostolic leaders. So it was never about helping people create cool things in different cities. It was a perseverance game. We figured if we can keep these types of people in the world doing what they do, then Babylon loses a little bit, kingdom wins a little bit, But if they don't make it, then a lot falls. The whole thing doesn't fall, but a lot falls.
That's a good clip right there. Well, here we are again. Welcome to Great Pages with the Brave Cities crew. And you guys are all looking good. You got a beautiful setup. So for those of you that have video access to this, look at these guys. Incredible.
Yeah.
So if it's not obvious, there's been quite the improvement since the last episode. And by the way, the last episode, we are now releasing these episodes that we have recorded kind of over time, over the kind of development and writing of the book that's coming out here in the near future. But as we listened to episode 2 on Inklings, we heard ourselves say, hey, we really need to circle back and talk about this thing that, like, things that haunt us. And we wanted to go ahead and do that. So what we decided to do was go ahead and record another episode, but then plug it back in here between episode 3 and 4. Then we'll continue rolling those out. So these guys may go back to looking like they don't have the setup that they have now. And then we'll be seeing this again in the future. But
we might just switch things up anyway, man.
Just mixing them up.
Yeah, keep it fresh.
I'm an artist, so I like to keep it all moving.
So y'all took a trip recently, right? You went down to Jackson, Mississippi. I'd love to just start there and hear about. Tell me about what you were doing, who you were visiting. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Tell them why we went down there.
Yeah,
because we were actually seeking out some endorsements for the book, and I actually didn't know this, but when Taylor was sharing, he mentioned John Perkins. Many people know John Perkins. I did not know that Taylor was so influenced by him until I heard Taylor talking to John personally. But yeah, we took an 8-hour drive just to see if we could get the man to be able to sit down with us. He's 93. So we weren't sure, it was like, but it was worth, our whole idea was like, well, it's worth the effort. This guy's been huge. So maybe you share a little bit about how you were inspired by the cat.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same as anybody's story that evolves over time. There are these kind of seminal moments when you have an encounter or a life experience, a tragedy, a book, a thought, kind of some thought leadership. And this is before I met you, John, before I connected to your crew in Tampa, before I knew Brian, before I had read any missional work. Kind of I always... a good friend of mine, a good friend of ours, is a guy in Long Beach, California, named Neil Cole. He wrote a book called Organic Church. We'll have him on the podcast at some point. Before I read his stuff, I mean, super influential in my life. I just heard a guy talk, and this was probably 2008, 2009, and it was Dr. John Perkins. He had founded the Christian Community Development Association and CCDA, and there was a guy in my town that was connected to John, and he just recommended him. He was hearing my language. If you know my story from knowing me or listening to this podcast, you know that I spent some time in traditional ministry from probably 2001 to 2009. And when we talk about calling, or this episode, we're going to talk about hauntings. I literally experienced a haunting this whole time, an unrest, the sleepless nights and the waking up thinking about it type of experiences. And a lot of it was because I would tell people I wasn't necessarily living my calling. I think there's nuance to that because I think it was really deeper than that. I think it was even deeper into the story of Brave Cities, deeper into the story of Luke 4, Jesus, I came to preach good news to the poor. But anyway, there's so much there in my personal life to where when Hugh said, hey, we need some endorsements for the book, or maybe it was our publisher, we need some endorsements. The name that I said instantly was Dr. John Perkins. Like, can we get him?
That'd be huge.
And we work with a community in Jackson, Mississippi. We work with a lot of communities, faith communities, movements around the country, just kind of saying any way we can help, we want to help. Usually they have economy involved in what they're doing. And this one down in Jackson, another friend we'll have on the podcast, Trey Malone, he is just rocking it when it comes to the economical side of things, business startups, innovation and mission through the market space. And turns out Trey has been working with Dr. Perkins' son, Derek, for about a year now. So Trey and I are talking. He's also an artist and a designer. I'm talking to him about the cover of the book and some ideas that I have. And one thing leads to another. I mentioned Dr. Perkins, and he's like, well, you know that I work with CCDA. I work with Derek Perkins. And I'm like, well, bro, we need a meeting with the Godfather. Yeah. So that's kind of how everything unfolded. And Trey was like, that's easy. We can meet with him anytime you want. We'll just, let him know. And we picked a date. We overnighted it. We went down got there at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. Yep. Met at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, hung out for 3 hours, ate lunch, and came back.
Had a little Zaxby's.
Yeah.
I was just shooting for Bono on the endorsement. He told me you could get Perkins, maybe. I was like, well, screw Bono. If we can get John, that's all we will need. So
yeah, talk about a real hero, man. And I'm even beyond endorsement. Like I'm jealous of just, we got to sit down at Zaxby's.
Yeah, no. And that was, by the way, about halfway through our time together, I think we all threw the endorsement idea out the window. We were like, he can do it or he can't. This doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. Like this moment. There's a lot of moments in our time, and we don't have to dwell too much on the moments because we want to talk about the overarching theme of making it to the end. But he looked up at us one time like, it was like a scene in a movie, man. He just kind of looked up slowly from the shadows and he said, we're having a divine moment right now, young men. And he wasn't being careless with his words.
Right.
There was a kind of that, if you've ever been in times where you go, oh, wait, like this is more manifest presence of God than just the presence of God. That's how it felt. But I do want to jump back for 1 second. So when I heard Dr. Perkins talk, he mentioned a community in Chicago that was led by a guy named Coach Wayne Gordon. And if you know anything about CCDA, you know Wayne Gordon and what he's done in Chicago for the past 30, 40 years. So what we did is, I've always been like a tangible, I need to see it. I need to feel it. Like I need something tactile in my hands to understand what these guys are saying. It's one of the reasons we're so passionate about immersions, is because we feel like if we can get on the ground with you, we can actually start to feel what you feel in your city. So my wife and I and a family friend of ours, we drove to Chicago. We made one phone call and we said, hey, is there any way we can just come and spend a couple hours with you guys? So we drove from Birmingham, Alabama, 2009, 10-ish to Chicago to see the community there near Garfield Park and Coach Wayne Gordon. And that was it for me, man. So like the reason Dr. Perkins is such a meaningful point in my timeline is when on our way back from Chicago, I knew that everything was different now. And I saw a kingdom ecosystem without them knowing that necessarily that was, or even identifying it as that. But it was an entire economy functioning in this little community in Chicago. They still had a kind of a traditional church expression, but it was not only was it in no way the kind of central element of their movement, it was sometimes could be seen as a little bit of a hindrance to movement, meaning there was a lot to manage there. But the rest is history for me. Soon after that, I stepped down from my paid position and have been doing what I'm doing now for 13, 14 years. And then the timeline of some of the men that I'm connected to, like this guy right here, Neil. I read a book called The Shaping of Things to Come. So all of those things are a part of my story. I met you, John. I met Brian and Jeremy in Tampa. That was huge for me because I had friends, and friendship is pretty valuable in this journey because you do feel like an exile. If you actually walk in this journey, you feel like an exile. And this is an important point. So I'm really, if it even remotely sounds like I'm rambling, I'm not. Yesterday, I'm talking with one of our leaders here. We're hanging some baseboard, which feels like the majority of what we do here is hang baseboard.
Pretty much terribly too. Not even
putting
good.
New toilets. So I'm talking with him, and he's talking about building culture and how hard it can be in the context of like our vision and our dream for both our community and our city. But think about it like this and see if we can take all of these things I've said and maybe riff on them. So when you're trying to build a culture that is consumed or centered on the idea of kingdom as opposed to Babylon, which, by the way, John, was the first thing that Perkins said was.
This was crazy, bro.
Yeah.
This was crazy.
So the first thing, we sit down. Nothing's been said other than handshakes. And Perkins is kind of sitting there looking at us, just kind of observing us because he realizes we're not who he thought we were. And I could tell that story later, but he was a little off on the purpose of the meeting. And without any words being said, he sensed something. And he said this later. He broke it all down for us. I thought y'all were, old
white,
rich white men coming in to raise money. And then as soon as I saw your faces, I knew, oh no, these men, they're here for the kingdom. And we're sitting there. No words had been said yet. His son was trying to navigate the meeting for him, and he just kept chewing him. Not in a bad way. He was like, wait. And he looks at us and he goes, we're living in Babylon. We can't change Babylon. And bro,
seriously, that's one of the first things he said.
Yeah. And Hugh just kind of looks over at me, and I don't know, we all knew like, okay, we're in the right spot right now. But that's my point is we're having this talk yesterday, and money and mammon is such a driving force for all of humanity, if not the single most important driving force. And what you're doing there with well-built cities and what we're doing here, what we're trying to tell the world through Brave Cities is money is no longer the driving force. So to think that you can grow this massive movement with people by telling them money is no longer our motivator, I think you're naive. Like, this isn't a movement for the masses. It's a movement for the remnant that believe in something more eternal, So that's it.
By the way, just a quick note. I wrote down, because we have a lot of people, like when Taylor's talking about haunting, and then we were talking about inklings, right? Inklings are those things that just get you maybe moving in a new direction.
Yep.
But a haunting would be where it changes everything.
Yeah.
So Taylor seeing Wayne Gordon stuff in Chicago, that's a haunting. That's like it's all changing now. But like we have, I mean, I would dare say we've had hundreds of people that have come into our space in the last with inklings.
Yeah.
But they're not, and the kicker is the money. It really is the money. And we've got other podcasts just on that alone. But
a haunting is like when your child gets leukemia. Everything changes.
Yep.
Money doesn't matter anymore.
Yep.
Nothing is. It's the predominant thought. It's I don't know if that's a crude example, but it's something that consumes you, and you go, oh,
yeah, even if it kills me, we're still going to do this.
Yeah, we're doing it.
You know, I think that's I like that you use that example though, because what it does is it calls to mind the idea of something like trauma. Whereas like there's these things that happen in our lives that really have their way with us. I mean, I don't know that it's rolled out yet, but we had a conversation where we talked a lot about like grief and pain, but like suffering, the role of suffering, grief, pain, things like that, they like are in very real ways encounters with powers that are greater than ourselves. They're things that grab us, have a grip of us, have their way with us, and kind of pull our attention away from all the crap that we normally pay attention to, the day-to-day stuff that we normally get worried about. It like ceases to matter in these things. And I think that's a good lens when you start thinking about haunting. Like there are encounters like when this came up in the Inklings episode, I was saying, you know, what are the early Inklings for me? And I told a few stories, but one of the stories was the first time I went out to share food with someone on the streets, like in any organized way. There was a local church that was doing that. And I went out and joined them, and I won't rehash the whole story here. You can go back and listen to it on that episode. But like, and I said, I went home and I was haunted by the fact that this beautiful brother is like sleeping in an alley. You
met the guy. That was the haunting.
And it couldn't shake it, right? Like his face was in my mind, in my head. And then I started going, hey, I need to get in these relationships. I need to meet and hang with these people, learn from these people on the streets here in my city. And then those would begin, all of those faces I would like carry with me. They begin to haunt me. Like when you start trying to make a decision, you see these faces. When you think, oh, I might move, you see these faces. And they become something like deep conviction that brings you to the place where, you know, the way I said it in that episode is that you end up finding yourself almost in marriage with the problem. Like this isn't something, it has me in a way that I'm not leaving. I'm not breaking away. And it's something that holds us in the game. So when we look at a life like Perkins and you go, man, what does it take to be here 73 years in the game? And I would argue probably something has a hold of you, something greater than you, something that haunts you, has you. And yeah, we wanted to kind of like, I don't know, explore that terrain a little bit.
Well, this is the idea. I mean, you said it. The idea is from inklings to haunting. And I've always wondered what takes us from inklings to hauntings. And I am curious if a lot of our stories would center in on something tactile, like something that we touched.
So I wish we had time to like even ask Dr. Perkins, like, what was the original haunting for him? Like what got him to where he, in the middle of that entire, I mean, it's almost pre-civil rights. Like what made you decide to put your life on the line? Because that's the way it was at the beginning of that stuff, you know? So it was interesting. At the end of our meeting, I went over to say hi to a woman that they've, I think, hired to kind of take care of Dr. Perkins and his wife. So his wife's still in the house. She was there. She was, you know, she's not doing well either, but this lady was basically like their caregiver.
Yep.
And she said, every day I clear off this table. It's like a little tiny round table in their kitchen. She goes, I clear this off. And she brings Mrs. Perkins in and sits her down, and then Dr. Perkins sits down next to her, and she said, his wife mostly just falls asleep, but John just sits there and talks to her. And they have kind of a time, and then they don't see each other the rest of the day. And then the next day they have their little time together. But as we were leaving, we were kind of done. We had already given John our hugs and said thank you. We're walking out the front door, and then he stops us and goes, "Hey, can you pray for me?" I mean, almost like a teenage kid. It was very, very humble. It wasn't like a religious thing. He was like almost like begging us to pray. And he said, not now, but just later. And it was really about his wife and about him making it. He wanted to stay there alive until his wife passed. And they've been married 70 some years. So like when you think about persevering in ministry, that's the power of like a haunting. It's like a marriage.
Right.
Like you
Right.
don't want to be unfaithful to it. We're an inkling, man. I mean, how many times, and I've done it too, where you get an inkling and you do something for 4 years or 7 years, and then you might get a better job somewhere across state, or you just take the job because it's a better job. Like those aren't hauntings. Those are, so I don't know if we'll get there, but I would think that the whole biblical narrative of persevering in the faith is based on, the Apostle Paul. What keeps him hanging in there probably was the memory of not being able to see for a couple of days and having such a demonstrative experience.
This is a really good parallel, man. We should kind of feather this out a little bit, because even thinking about the what was the episode we did, the 4 orthos?
Yeah.
So like the orthotopic is it the orthotopic? No, what's the one that's so seminal to that conversation?
I mean that would be the addition. The orthotopic is like the idea of place, being in the right place, right. which we haven't released those yet. This is the problem with us like circling back on these. It's but
okay. We'll give a little teaser, because you need to anticipate this. Because look, what's the most significant thing about if inkling is courting and haunting is moving into that next phase of covenant, which is marriage? What's the most significant thing? What's the change agent of marriage? It's orthotopic, right? Is that fair?
You're now in the same
house. You move. You change place. Nothing else really changes. I mean, sure, sex and stuff like that, but that's not my point. That's not even relevant to what I'm saying. Like, even the text that says, a man leaves his father and mother and cleave, like the orthotopic changes. So when I think about my own testimony, what was the thing that Perkins and Gordon affected so much in my life? It was me moving. Mm-hmm. And are you familiar with John's 3 R's? From
relocate. Yes,
that's it. That's the only one I wanted you to.
Okay.
It's relocate, redistribute, and it's relocation, redistribution, reconciliation. Yep. But what's the first one? It's orthotopic. Well, why? Because all 3 of us know, and anyone who's listening knows good and well, that when you go to the beach, the best thing about the beach is you're not haunted anymore. You get to just sit back, drink a pina colada, and not be haunted, because your location has changed. But when you're sitting in the midst of the pain, and this was, by the way, one of the only questions that I asked Dr. Perkins. I said, all of us in this room that I know personally are surrounded by pain, by poverty, addiction, fatherlessness, violence, perversion, like suffocating pain.
Yeah.
Do you want to give up sometimes? Do you remember what he said?
Every day, all the time.
94 years old. So like
every day, all the time.
That statement I had to take home with me. Like I had to meditate on my whole way home. I ended up getting in the back seat and just writing for a while because Derek ended up telling us a story that so CCDA's headquarters are right next to Dr. Perkins' house.
Okay.
And I want to say within this semester, maybe within this month, there have been 2 drive-by shootings.
Yeah, the same woman that was sharing with me about their morning thing. We pulled in behind her. She thought that we were coming to shoot her. And then she goes, oh, then I realized you guys were white dudes, so I might be safe. But they've had, I mean, they're still in the middle of the stuff. I think they said they had five shootings.
She didn't feel safe.
No.
She just said, never mind. I thought y'all were coming to audit me or evict me. She said, the drive-bys are mostly done by the demographic in the neighborhood. And there have been 2 just in the past month outside of Dr. Perkins' home where he's been ministering for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, every day, all day, I feel this. But I persevere not because of results or because of and he said it again. He said, you all of you know, I have it recorded. He said, all of you know we can't change Babylon. And I just went, because you don't know me, right? So I just looked at him and I went, yes, sir, we know. Or like what I was trying to say was, yes.
Yeah.
No, you're gonna actually read that this week. That we feel that way too. And
by the way, all the 8 hours driving to that, we were mostly just talking 3 guys about all the things that we're bitching and moaning about and stuff that's happened to us that we're not happy about. And driving home, it's kind of like we're not talking about that stuff anymore because we just go. And I think that's the point of a haunting. It literally pulls you into, like, you're gonna make it. You'll make it all the way to the end because Dr. John did. And Dr. John would probably point to some other dudes and go, because those guys made it, I made it. Ultimately, we look at the story of Christ and those that started the story, and you go, well, they made it. So we're just not going to quit this thing. And why do we quit? Because we get mad at Babylon. We think Babylon should deliver an easier road.
Yeah.
And we actually blame God for Babylon sucking so bad. So I look at Dr. Perkins and I go, man, he loved Jesus. Like, he was not putting the blame on him. And it was very refreshing. Like, in the 5 minutes in, I internally went, I got to quit bitching. So lots of questions for me as a 57-year-old. Like, do I want to waste the last 25 I got on trying to, at the end of the time, I was like, yeah, I guess we will.
There's a settling. There was a settling in him that I wonder when it will come. But I don't think it comes just with time. I think it comes with faith. He could not stop talking about the wonder of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like a kid in youth group that had just encountered God for the first time. And so all of that, those little moments were, they had to cause reflection for us. And, I do this a lot, man. Somebody will come to me and they'll want a coaching call or something, and they'll have all these issues. And there's such a difference, I think, between knowing the truth and embodying and like manifesting the truth. And it seems like this man somewhere along the way has embodied the truth of endurance, of worship of God, of faithfulness to Jesus and the calling of Jesus, Isaiah 61, Luke 4, like he just believed it. And that's what I meant earlier when I said, like, if inklings are like courting, I do think, no judgment, but I do think that the majority of people that I talk to, they have an inkling. And, strangely, inklings or courting can feel more passionate than marriage, right? Marriage is covenant. Marriage is just steady commitment. Inkling is like exciting. You want to do it. You want to go and romanticize this inkling. A covenant, you kind of get done with the romance of like soft music and candlelight. It's still fine to do. That's not my point. We could talk about that another time. My point is the covenant is so centered on place and commitment and a haunting. Mm-hmm. So moving from that inkling phase to that haunting phase feels like the ethos of this conversation.
Though it's an evolution, right? So I imagine there probably are stories where someone gets smacked in the face by something that haunts them that there was no inkling to pursue. But in this conversation, it does seem to be like you talk to people with an inkling. And oh, let me tell you this story. So there's this woman, not even important who she is. She just works at a local like community radio station here. And we were in a meeting, not her and I, but like community members were in this meeting. But I was like facilitating a conversation on poverty and addressing like we're in a neighborhood with real poverty, and like there's also real like community development work, and then like then developers, right? So there's like whatever. So we're having this conversation around this, and this woman expresses basically a sentiment of like, what's the point of talking about anything really? Like basically like the poor are screwed. There's nothing any of us can do. What's the point? We shouldn't waste our time or attention anymore. We shouldn't worry about it anymore. They're screwed. Just very fatalistic. And she's like, I've moved on basically. And I can't tell you exactly what I said to her, but I said some stuff, right? And I have this thing that I do that it's an internal prayer that I almost don't realize I do until now we're talking about haunting. And it reminds me of this with her. I'll tell you what I do in a sec because I told her this. So she leaves. The meeting's over. I didn't think much of it. And I thought, man, she was pretty disruptive, whatever. Like she didn't help this conversation that everyone else was trying to have. Anyway, it's fine. Month later, maybe we're at this like fundraiser for another it's actually a community development organization here doing a fundraiser, their annual gala I'm at. She shows up. I'm like, oh, hey. She's like, hey, I need to talk to you. Can we grab coffee or lunch one day? She's like, I want to have the conversation around poverty. I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. And like, I don't think I was right. And like, whatever, just like, but like, I still think it's a problem too big for us, but I want to like have the conversation with you. And I just grinned and I was like, what's funny? I have this thing I do where a lot of times when I'm in those moments, like I don't even know what I said, but I know that I prayed, I hope this haunts you. And there's a way in which, and then so anyway, just there's a little vignette story because like this is a month later, she's like, I can't stop thinking about that. Can we talk? We've since had a follow-up, and I can't say like, oh, here's those amazing things that have come of it, but the conversation goes on, right? And when you said, I think when we think of our own stories, there might be for a lot of us this tactile thing. I'm curious, like how that. Well, one, you talk to a lot of people with inklings, and like the prayer of like you might be able to facilitate something that haunts those that come to you with an inkling. It feels like there's a responsibility there to like pray that you get haunted too. But then also like the tactile thing, I think might be back to your like the value of immersion experiences. Like, oh, you have questions. How about this? Come and see, come and walk, come and taste and touch and like enter into this space in this community. And how much greater of an impact. And actually what I've actually thought about that is like a way to benevolently traumatize somebody. Like to go like, I want to bring you to a place that you won't forget this for the rest of your life because it just got in there. AKA it will haunt you.
Keep in the same flow. Can we be haunted in the context of all this?
Yeah.
Without the poor. And I can unpack that a little if I need to, but I feel like that's.
And I was just thinking also, we can't be haunted by a thing.
Just define a thing.
Well, like what we've been talking about, we really have been captivated by the journey of people.
Right.
Either
so
the journey of
like a large gathering.
But like John is the haunting. Like it's not so much what John has done. It's the person that caught, like I was even thinking in regards to what caused you to persevere. A lot of times, because I'm older, I do want to go to the beach today. And I think I've put in my time. Let the youngies do this. Mm-hmm. And then I might have a 7-minute conversation with Taylor. And so to me, the peer pressure is, or if somebody goes, how do I move it from an inkling to a haunting? I go, you got to get around people that are haunted. It's the people. So I was even telling the story to my wife the next day, and she's like, why do you think he made it? It's probably the community of friends that he was on mission with that kept him going. I mean, my guess is there's thousands of mornings that he was like, I'm out of here. This is not working. So the power of a haunted community, we carry around in our body the dying of Jesus. That's a community passage. That's not a individual passage. So
okay, so look, hold on. So this feels like now I feel like we're going in. I'm going to stick with the analogy. Now we're talking about children. So would I still be with Lindsay if I didn't have 5 children? Of course. I mean, I think of course. But there is something now I think about, and children don't have to even be like Allie just got a baby, right?
Yeah, she got a baby 2 days ago. And my first thought was, oh, geez, here we go again. But here's what we're doing again.
Well, it's the minute I read about her that they're foster parents.
Okay, hence got a baby. I was like,
yeah, sorry, we should have shared how she got the baby.
They're busy enough as it is, and they're always taking on in these kids, and I know firsthand what that feels like. It's heavy, and as soon as I read it, I was like, man, this is just, come on, Allie, like stop, But I realized instantly, like, no, this is what keeps her. Like, if the covenant to the haunting initially is like the covenant to marriage, then now I think about Dr. Perkins and all of the children like me or you actually, you would say, tie yourself to him as well. And I think we could probably 5 out of 10 conversations of people in our stream would go, oh yeah, Dr. Perkins. Yeah. I just saw that on my social media posts, like the amount of people that commented and said, oh yeah, for me too, So anyway, play with that a little, because when people are haunted for an organization, it just sounds hilarious to me.
Well, and I don't think that's possible, right? I don't think that's actually possible.
That's what I'm saying.
So like, it's one of those things, like
it's like porn, isn't it?
What?
Yeah, no, like think about it. It's like a false.
No, what?
No, so porn as opposed to a covenant marriage.
Yeah.
Like, go with me for a second. It's manufactured.
Yeah.
It's not real.
It's Vegas.
It's virtual. You're not haunted for this woman on a screen or in a magazine. She's
avatar.
Yeah,
not real.
And you can't be haunted for an organization. You can't have this dream that keeps you up at night of building a big organization. It's false.
I don't know who said it once, but like true calling, like again, you're going, how do I go from inkling to haunting? True calling cannot be like a position. Hey, I'm being called to be an associate pastor. That's not really a calling. Calling has to be based on a people or a place. So I think you can get haunted for people for sure. And you might even get haunted for Alton or for Birmingham.
But it's because of the people.
Yeah, it's because of the people. Yeah.
No, but that's what I was going to say. I think that's right. And this is where it's like oriented around cause might be language people would use. Like if they were like to where, like, if you imagine, like, I don't know, someone asked, I forget what it was. Someone asked me one day, like, well, what if, like, the Well is an organization, is a 501c3, they have a board, they could like just like fire you. Like, what would you do? And I'm like, the same thing the next day, because like this isn't about some job or something. Like, this is like, good luck with that. But like, so okay, so this haunting thing does seem to encounter, like my story was like, I was haunted by this face, by this person, by this thing. And then what that did in me was it turned to conviction, where I started saying, man, like, I don't want to live in a city like this. I don't want to live in a city that doesn't work for these beautiful brothers and sisters. And then what that would lead me to is finding people. Well, first of all, it lead me to marrying. I think the marriage language is right, to marry not an organization, but a problem. Like, I married the problem that is like generational poverty in my city, destitution and homelessness in my city. And it's like this problem is like, I had, like, vows were made in a way, like, over my dead body, will these be like, this is, how could you look past this, right? And then you find others who share these convictions. Whether you can pray them into being haunted themselves, convince them to join you, but the orientation isn't, hey, and even like, let's just take leadership, recruiting, fundraising, whatever. Like, you're not calling someone to support the Well or Brave Cities or join the organization, but to the cause itself, to the thing that is the problem in our city. Then this organization is just a tool. It's just a tool. It's a thing that we can utilize to build. But covenant community is then formed in like shoulder to shoulder work around shared conviction, because of like mutual haunting, which at some level, what is it that's haunting us? I can't help but think something like the Holy Spirit, right? Like, it's the Spirit of God, like, stirring something deep in us. That's like, there's verses like a deer pants for water. It's like this, you can't shake it, you can't quench it, you can't, it just pulls you, calls you in, like a power greater than yourself.
Yeah, what happened to Paul when they imprisoned him? He just starts healing folks and leading people to freedom in the jail cells.
Well, that's an interesting thing about him saying, like, and I've learned to be content in every circumstance. It's not like I'm just very stoic and okay. It's like, wherever I am,
it doesn't matter.
I'm on the job.
Right. And that's another kind of idea that is so liberating, because that is ultimate freedom to me in work, in the idea of work. Work with your hands, be content. What is it? Be simple. You can't take my work from me. I'm not interested in an organization or a position or a paycheck. I have a calling that I'm bound by, which, by the way, if you're listening to this and you've felt this before, that this sometimes can be terrifying. It can be terrible because you don't want to do it anymore. You want to go and live the rest of your life in ease and luxury or whatever, but that you can't. You're bound by this calling to the point where it does almost feel like you're in chains, like Paul said.
Yeah.
It's Romans, you got to serve somebody, right? So you're either serving flesh or you're serving spirit. If you were to ask John, like, what's calling, what's been his calling, he'd probably reference something related to abolition, not just out of, black folks out of slavery. But when he starts the meeting by saying you can't change Babylon, my guess would be he's an abolitionist. He's just trying to pull one person here, one person there out of slavery to a new master, right?
which is exactly the call, right?
So if you can settle the issue that Babylon is always going to suck, world's going to get worse, issues with people, how it affects us is going to keep getting worse and worse and worse, and you don't get angry anymore about that, but you just go, well, we'll just try to save one or two. Then I don't know. I think it can be a clarifying moment. Like, you don't have to like live in cynicism. You can literally go, I don't know, maybe I'll get two out of slavery, maybe three, maybe 14, but like at least it gives you something to die for. Where I don't know, I mean, I always ask, what else are you going to do? Like, are you really just going to live your life, especially to paid professional priests? You're just going to live your life taking the paycheck and not working towards the end of usurping Babylon? Like, what else is there? So I don't know. Maybe that's a final challenge. My guess would be there's lots of people that are listening, trying to figure out, is it really worth it? And I'd pose that question. When you're around people that have lived their life around a haunting, wouldn't you rather have that be your story than just dancing around, skipping around with people with lots of different little inklings?
But rest assured, if it's an inkling, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's just not. And that's not a matter of human endurance or conviction even. It's not a matter of your own kind of will and perseverance, which I think is also a good word for those who might elevate others or inversely judge others for not enduring. Dr. Perkins seems like he was haunted by something 60 years ago, 70 years ago, that he's bound by. So how you manufacture or facilitate that, I could never know.
Yeah.
But I do know that this work that we're doing with Brave Cities is an effort to move people from inklings to hauntings.
We actually said the primary goal of why we started Brave Cities was to try to save the lives of apostolic leaders. So it was never about helping people create cool things in different cities. It was a perseverance game. We figured if we can keep these types of people in the world doing what they do, then Babylon loses a little bit, kingdom wins a little bit, but if they don't make it, then a lot falls. The whole thing doesn't fall, but a lot falls.
That's a good clip right there.
Guys, this has been really good. I'm glad we decided to do what we said we would do and to have this conversation around haunting. Anything else you want to throw in before we wrap?
Anything else I throw in is going to lead to 40 more minutes of talking, and
I got to go set a toilet.
That's not a metaphor.
Nice.
He really does.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. John.
Good to see you, man.
You too.